Greetings and welcome. My name is Jake Rayson. I'm a forest gardener and forest garden designer, and this is the regular Wednesday 10 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time forest garden live stream, brought to you from the luxury surroundings of the spare bedroom. And studio. It's a studio. It's not a spare bedroom. And yeah, I've got a view of one of the forest gardens out of the window, which is nice. So what I'm going to do now, there's no slideshow as such. I wanted to talk about forest gardening and why forest gardening is so good at bringing together various elements, and it's the way that it integrates different aspects of gardening. And for me, it's actually it's a kind of, not to sound too deterministic about it, it's a logical extension of gardening. I think this is a way that gardening will go, through necessity, but also through awareness as well. So the three things, and I will add these. I'm recording. I will add these three things to the recording. So the three things that forest gardening combines are: firstly, it's wildlife gardening; secondly, edible gardening; and thirdly, ornamental gardening. And very often these are seen as three separate disciplines. Part of the problem that we face as a species, that's a bit grandiose, part of the problem that we face as gardeners, part of the problem that we kind of all face really, is how we divide things up, and the separation of things and the disconnection of things can lead to problems further down the line. To quote somebody famous whose name I can't remember, was it Walt Whitman? No, somebody else. If you try and pull something out and examine it in isolation, it messily pulls everything else with it, because everything else is interconnected. And I think you've always have to bear in mind that any analysis is only a model. You can't look at the totality. You can only look at certain aspects, otherwise you'd be overwhelmed by the complexity and the interconnection of everything. So you break it down into small little chunks, but always with a caveat that the connection, there is an immense number of connections. And when we look at things in isolation, those things are connected to other things. Yep, those things are models, and no model is the model is not existence. In the words of the famous crikey, was he a cartographer, a philosopher? He was Russian or something. There's a chap who said that the map is not the territory, and by this it means the model that you create, the how you look at things, is not, and what you see and what you perceive and what you understand is not everything. Okay, so long as you're aware of that, that's okay, and be humble in your knowledge. Hubris is when you think you know everything, and that's kind of like you can't really do it. So that's a little intellectual detour. So what is happening with gardening generally now, I think it's a really, really good move, but it's that the people are seeing that we need to, if we are going to survive on a global scale, there needs to be a fundamental change in the way that we approach the environment and ecosystems. And this is reflected within gardening. So you make it a priority, first and foremost, to look at the environment. It's the starting point. So when you're creating a garden, you look at what ecosystems are already in place, and you look at the land that you have and how that land fits into the landscape. So that's the first thing. So number one, looking at wildlife. I always recommend Benjamin Vogt's book. So I'll come on to that in a second. No. Very often I will recommend looking at wildlife gardening, And the principles are really kind of not pretty simple. There's some very simple things that you can do that will encourage wildlife in your garden. So when I kind of design a garden, or when I'm gardening, this is the first thing that I look at, is looking at wildlife, because it's an integral part. It's not something you bolt on at the end. Oh, we'll put in a bee hotel and that'll be it. It's something that you consider at the beginning. So the books that I am not by any stretch of the imagination, I would not even pretend to have an inkling about ecology and wildlife. But I do recommend that if you're interested, there's a Kate Bradbury's book. Hold on, can you see that? Wildlife Gardening. It's very good, really, really good introduction. And it just gets you to look in the bigger picture about what wildlife you will have there. Pam, who's on the WhatsApp group, big shout out to Pam again. She said something really, really important when I was putting together my course, The Backyard Forest, which you can buy. Actually, I do a little thing, which you can buy here. When I was doing my course, she said that there's a part of it when you are looking at creating a plan. You're doing a kind of survey of all the different parts of your garden, and a very important point that she made is be aware of what wildlife already exists. You don't want to be going ripping up habitat and food sources in a kind of let's get rid of everything in the garden and let's put in forest garden plants. You want to be very kind of sensitive to what lives there already and how you can enhance that wildlife. So that's really that came in really, that was really, really useful. So thank you for that, Pam. It kind of stuck with me. And this is something that I've had actually when I've talked to an ecologist about a possible project up in Aberystwyth, and the ecologist said, be careful not to get rid of existing habitat. And it's exactly the same point. I was looking at planting up some scrubland as a forest garden, and she was saying, yeah, be careful, don't get rid of stuff which is good for existing wildlife. And the other book that I recommend is the Wildlife Pond book as well, because a pond is like one of the best things that you can do for wildlife in a garden. And I do think I'm going to put a handy little title up here. Every garden, look, is it that way? No, it's that way. Is it that way? That way. Every garden is an ecological opportunity. And people, regular viewers or participants will know that I am a big fan of creating diverse habitats. And I'm a big fan of a gardener called John Little, primarily because he's got a really good ethos when it comes to involving people in gardening, but also on using existing materials, using what are called waste materials, so subsoils and subsoils and like concrete and tarmac and just sand, and using them and then planting them up with plants that like that particular habitat. And the point of this, what you are doing with every single garden, what you are doing, you have the opportunity to create a huge number of different habitats. And you actually have an advantage as a gardener, as a human. You can visualize this, you can get this idea in your head from the beginning and say, cool, well, you wouldn't normally have a massive, great big pile of crushed concrete in a garden, but we've got the remains of an old shed, concrete shed or something, and we'll bash it up together and we'll make a mound of crushed concrete and plant up plants that like crushed concrete, which I don't think is that many. I think thyme's about the only thing that will grow on crushed concrete, but it's a different habitat. Yeah, so you're using existing materials, and the whole point is to create as many habitats as you can. This came up with a chap called, oh my goodness me, Thomas Jaffer, Jaffer. I think I shall put his name here on a Growing Greener podcast. And he was brilliant, really, really interesting for what I would call a forest gardener. And he was saying every time he was gardening, he was thinking about what can I do to create habitat? And I think that's a brilliant way of looking at it. And in a forest garden, I think it's the same thing. What can I do to create habitat and to grow food? And that's habitat and food for everybody. So that's a brilliant way of starting. Somebody else I'd like to mention who is on the mailing list, the newsletter that I sent out, excuse me, is a chap called Malcolm Berry, who came up with conversation actually the other day with a chap from the National Botanic Garden, Wales. They had a Zoom course, and I went along and went onto the Zoom course. It was questions and answers, and I think his name was Dan. I can't remember. Sorry, brain like a sieve. He's very nice chap. The name will come to me later. I'll put his name here. From National Botanic Garden, Wales, and he did some work with Malcolm Berry. Now, Malcolm Berry was a head gardener at a very famous garden in Wales, and he's a real kind of wildlife gardener. And I went to a talk with him, which was brilliant, and I actually wrote down the features. He said, nice and simple, these are the features in a garden. If you want a wildlife garden, these are the things to grow. So I wrote a little blog post about it, which you can see here. I'll just go through them very quickly just so you get an idea. So wildlife pond, if you can, wildlife pond. Number 2, native plants where possible. And this is because in the wrong book, in the words of Benjamin Vogt, another book recommendation, A New Garden Ethic. I don't know if it's in his words, but lots of people say you grow native plants because they have co-evolved with the native wildlife, and they are a food source for insects, primarily insects, but other creatures as well. So they're habitat and a food source for native wildlife. And the most important aspect of native wildlife are insects. So what you're doing in a forest garden and a wildlife garden is you're encouraging as many insects as possible, which is the opposite of what we've been taught. You want to bring them all the insects in, eat everything, and then you get all the predators in and it balances out. That's the idea. Yeah, you don't destroy all insects because A, you can't, and B, it'll just mess everything up. So we need to bring it into balance. That's the key point. So native plants where possible, and and then creating different habitats, and that's the rest of them. For me, it's like creating these different habitats. So have a small patch of meadow. Malcolm Berry has only cuts the grass in cycles. Malcolm Berry only cuts his meadow once every 3 years, but in patches. So you do one third of it one year, one third the next year, one third the next year, and that encourages an even greater diversity. And it's a small patch as well. I mean, when I saw his slideshow, it's a small patch of meadow, but it supports a wide range of different insects. So really, really important. And again, this isn't like amazingly productive in a forest garden sense, but it is something that you're doing to create extra habitat and increasing diversity, which is the thing, critical thing. Increase habitat, increase food source, increase diversity. So a meadow patch, and then hedges. And hedges are brilliant as well because they're providing habitat and they're providing food source, and it's shelter and it's windbreak and you can get harvest from it. So it's fantastic. So hedges are brilliant rather than a plain fence. So yeah, whatever form they take, so they can be climbers up a hedge. I can really recommend an everlasting pea. Hold on a second, let me get my finger, point my finger up. Everlasting pea. There's a native, which I think is narrow-leaved everlasting pea. Can't remember. Lathyrus. Oh, I can't remember the names of them. And then there's a non-native but very closely related one, and they're brilliant for scrambling up. If you put ties in on a fence, they'll climb up. They're perennial. They're really low maintenance. They're very colourful. They don't have an odour, but you get beautiful sweet peas flowers from them. So really, really lovely. And that kind of acts as a hedge, even if you don't have one. So climbers, the same kind of thing. You can use a climber as a hedge up an existing fence if you're not putting a hedge in, and shrubs do the same thing as well. When you are creating a hedge, always plant for the final size, the final height and the final diameter. This reduces the maintenance. and it increases the if you're not cutting your hedge all the time, then that's less disturbance, and that's protecting the environment, protecting the habitat for the occupants of that hedge. So the less maintenance the possible. This actually comes over across in soil as well. The less digging, the better. The less disturbance, the better. So when you are weeding, if you can, if it's a plant like a plantain or a dandelion, I scissor weed. So I get a pair of scissors and you just chop the top off, and let the existing ground cover swamp the plant that you don't want. It'll grow back, but just do the same thing again. There's less root disturbance. Obviously, things like grass and bramble, if you don't want it there, you've got to really kind of pull it up, because it will kind of come back with a vengeance. And then mature trees and shrubs. Obviously, in a forest garden, this is what you're growing. And log piles, and I'll zoom into a little bit here. Wow, look at that. Log piles. Log piles are so easy. A stack of logs. Now, I just wanted to talk to you very quickly about. Thank you. So, for example, there's a picture I love from John Little. I think he had created a dead hedge, but a beautifully curved and sculpted dead hedge, and it looked like an Andy Goldsworthy piece. And I think this is what you can do. You can use the raw materials, the same thing, but make it look attractive to humans, but also it has a function as well. So you get the best of both worlds, and it doesn't take much, just a kind of lining things up. Animals don't care if things are in a straight line. They don't care if they're wonky. They don't care if it's in an old supermarket trolley. They really don't care. So you can think about kind of creating kind of artwork, but creating putting a bit more thought into the habitat you're creating. So this example here is from Gardener's World, and it's just like a tidy, it's a stack of logs, and they put a little moss roof on it, so it just it looks brilliant with a little pile of forget-me-nots by the side of it. So I love it. I think that's just such a really, really nice example of some creativity, like human creativity, but it's doing the job. Alternatively, you can put your log pile beneath a shrub, behind a shrub, so it's doing exactly the same job. No one can really see it, but it's doing the same thing. So no matter how tidy your garden, there's always a space for a log pile. The other things that you can put in as well are stone piles and stone walls, so like stacks of stones, or if you've got a stone wall, then you can use that as well to encourage habitat. And flowers, so native wildflowers. I haven't got it here. I'm so getting into native wildflowers. A big shout out to Barry and Sandra at Celtic Wildflowers. I've just put a big order in with them, and Matthew at British Wildflower Plants, and Lindsay as well, who's off on maternity leave, but she's down in Pembrokeshire. She does native wildflowers as well. So that's Lindsay's website address there. So they've all been super, super helpful, and it's been great it's been a real joy and a pleasure to explore different native wildflowers that you can use in an ornamental way. So this is the crossover that I'm talking about. This is the thing. When you're designing a garden, it's that ability to be able to use something that has an ecological. You start off with the wildlife. It's using your ecological knowledge about a wild plant and what species it supports, and also what habitat it creates and how it fits in with other plants. But you're doing it in an ornamental fashion as well. So it's really, really exciting, and I think this is such a nice thing to do. So now I'm going to swap over. Let me just get that back. I'm going to swap over to a couple of examples. So this is the first example. I've talked about this before. This is a holiday house. For those people who aren't too au fait with how, I don't know if you can use the cursor. You can see the orange bit is the house, and this is a view from the top. This is a plan view, and I'll zoom in, and you can see people here. Whee. And this is my first foray. Whoa, it's a bit clunky. Here's some people with ties and crossed legs sitting in a hot tub. But those are the only CAD people I could get. And you can see them from the top, and there's somebody walking past. And because it's a holiday house, they're having a hot tub put in. But I'm surrounding it with plants. So the lovely... I mean, this is so exciting because I've got a range of different plants that I want to put in. And native, mostly native. There's a few like non-native, but they're kind of they're in there. So, as an example, here along the top of the around the top of the back of the hot tub, I'm putting in some purple moorgrass, Millennia caerula. Sorry, but my Latin's not all that. And there's a whole load of different. It's native, but there's a whole load of different cultivars, what are called nativars, and they provide good habitat as well for plants. This is in Poppet Sands near Cardigan, there's some sand dunes there, which is like one of my favourite places to go to out on the walk, because there's just such it's brilliant. You've got trees growing in sand, like sycamores and blackthorn and hawthorns, and it's just incredible to see. And then you have a range of different roses and wild clematis, old man's beard, clematis vitit. Oh, what is it called? Clematis viticella? Oh, can't remember. But there's such a diverse range of native plants in the vicinity, and there's thrift and great mullein, all sorts of different plants about the place, and then using these as an inspiration for the garden itself. So there's what you're doing, and what is good to, there's a function for the beds in the garden. It's a big patio, so I'm breaking up the patio into different sections. So the function of the bed is to provide a screen for the hot tub, and it's to provide a little backdrop against the glass balustrade down at the bottom. There's a water bowl for wildlife, for birds to get into as a water source. It's breaking up the expanse, so it's a kind of visual element, but there's also plants in here, like sun-loving plants at the front here. And then there's a barbecue in the centre, and it's it's like one of those big old organs, and it's smack bang in the centre. And around the barbecue, there are edible plants. So there is caraway, and there's a lavender, and there's just a variety of different things, wild carrot. So and then different herbs as well. And it's just it's a combination of the edible aspect to it. So you have the edible plants next to the barbecue that you're going to be using on the barbecue, but it's also there's native plants there, and they have flowers on them as well. So it's kind of trying to bring all three together, and it's an interesting space, because you are creating, in each of those beds, you're creating a different habitat, and you have control over the growing medium. So I'll just take you up to the top end. So there's hot tub one side, water bowl, barbecue in the middle, and then there's a seating area, L-shaped seating at the back, and then some picnic tables in here. And it's just great because there's going to be a green roof strip, so you're sat at the top end here, and then there's going to be a strip of green roof. So it's not very wide, but it's going to be green, and it's going to have sedum, and I can't get hold of thrift actually. Sedum and thrift and chives, and there's a big list of them. And I want to create different environments. Even within that small space, you can create different environments. So I really want to get some driftwood and have a driftwood back a lot along one edge, and then put a sandy area in there at one end, and to have a pile of stones in there as well. So even in that small space, you're just creating lots of little habitats. And then the great thing is, I've got a few plug plants to put in, but the great thing is then I'm going to be putting in wildflower seeds as well. And I never got this. This is a bit of a revelation to me, that whatever garden whatever kind of forest garden, if it's like a proper forest garden, or a proper ornamental garden, whatever it is you've got, whilst your perennials are getting established, there will always be gaps around, because you when you buy a plant, you're buying a plant in a 5 centimeter or 9 centimeter pot or whatever it is, and they're little plants and they're going to grow to big bushes, but there's lots of gaps about the place. So why not fill in the gaps with annuals temporarily, and sow some annual seed in there, and then that gives you that kind of increases the diversity. If they're happy, they'll grow, and if they're happy, they'll self-seed. And if it works out that there's enough space there, then they'll keep on self-seeding. And if they don't, well, they don't survive. So but it's yet another opportunity, and you can use native wildflower seed to do this. So I think that's really, really interesting. So that was one that I wanted to talk about, and then the other one. So I hope that kind of makes some sort of sense that you get of the garden as a whole, and what I'm trying to do with it, with edible plants, but native wildflowers on the ornamental side, and wildlife as well, but with features in there which will support different wildlife. So a pile of stones in the green green roof by the seating area, the water bowl for the birds. So yeah, lots of different parts, lots of different things that you can just fit into a small space as well. So I think that's a really exciting project. And I'm getting my first, well, it's not my first plants. I'm getting a load of wildflower plants arriving tomorrow, so that's good. And then I just wanted to show you very quickly another project. This is a very, very different project, very low budget for what it is. It's 10 semi-detached eco houses, and the brief is very, very simple. There's a hedge at the front. There's a hedge, a tree, a fruit tree, and then grass lawns, because it's social housing, and people in social housing don't. I'm not sure I think the argument is people in social housing don't have the vested interest in the gardening. I think there's things you can do about it, and I think this is the other aspect that I wanted to talk about. I thought I wouldn't have anything to talk about today, but there we go. This is the other aspect that I think is really good. So for those people you can't see, along the top you can see there are two buildings, and that's four houses, 4 dwellings. Along the bottom there's 3 buildings, which is six dwellings. And I'll just zoom in just to give you an idea. I have chosen fruit trees, and that's the brief, is to have fruit trees in the gardens. But it's actually quite complicated in an exciting way, because I could just put in Golden Delicious on a M106 rootstock, every single garden, bash it in, it costs this, it goes in, I make X amount of money. And then there's a hedgerow, and you could put in this hedging plant, and you can get them for 69 pence from bulk hedging plants direct.co.uk or whatever. But that's just not really, that doesn't really do it for me. So what I want to do is to choose a diverse range of fruit trees. So there are apple trees, plum trees and pear trees, mostly apple, and then choosing apple trees that are good cookers and eaters, disease resistant, and there's a long season. So one house, for example, let's just take this house down here, plot number 1, has an apple Ashmead's kernel, and this is this is an old 1700s russet apple. Doesn't look all that, has a really fantastic flavour apparently. I haven't tasted them. I've actually got one here, and it's in a certain pollinating group, and I've put in a crab apple next door to it, and this comes in late winter, so this is December. And then you have another apple which will be an early season. So there's 2 early season ones, 2 mid-season ones, 2 late season ones, and a couple others as well. So the idea is that you've got an apple for every season, and this is where the plan comes in. So my plan is, I'll put a big sign here. Hold on, where's my fingers gone? Where is it? Oh, I can't work out where it's going. That way. This is where the big plan is, make the information about the trees readily available to the residents so that they know what tree they've got, and then they have the opportunity to take part in the maintenance, which is a part I've written into the contract. Well, I haven't written it in. I just said you need to. They need pruning regularly after the first year, once a year. But involve the residents in that process, and then the next thing is to encourage people to share the harvest, so that when they get apples, they share them out. Their next door neighbours, they've got more apples than they know what to do with. They give them to their other neighbours, and then other neighbours have a plum, and someone else has got a pear, and someone else has a summer apple. So you get the idea. So that's the community aspect of this, and I think this is kind of really powerful. And this is what's worked really well for me with doing the Forest Garden live streams, is that it's the community aspect, and there's a whole lot of people involved in this too. In this kind of wider project, it's more than just what I'm doing. And then the other thing that I'm doing, and which I've been asking questions about, is putting hedging in. And I've got a little system to reuse the symbols for the different hedges. But there's blackcurrant, josterberry, chuckleberry, which is a cross of a blackcurrant with a, oh goodness me, I can't remember now. It's an interesting plant, and blue honeyberry, Lathyrus caerula. And there's 4, so I've got 4 different species as a hedging plant. They're fruiting hedging plant. I'm not terribly sure how close to plant them. I think, again, talking to Pam earlier, she was saying, if you're planting them as bushes, you're planting them like a good metre, 2 metres apart? No, 6 foot apart, yeah, getting on for 2 metres apart, but that's as standalone bushes. Whereas a hedge, I think you're going to be looking at more, I don't know, 3/4 of a metre, so like 2 feet apart. So, and then there's enough... they got enough light to fruit, but also you're getting a hedge out of them too. And by having 4 different species, there will be 4 different harvests that people can share across the year as well. So there's some other species in there that I am considering. There's a Saskatoon and possibly an Aronia. I think they might be a bit possibly too big, but I'll have a think about it. But again, be really good to get this rolling in terms of the maintenance, that you're involving people and saying, this is a blackcurrant bush, this is how you prune it, this is when you prune it, and leave it up to people. If they do it, they do it. If they don't do it, then somebody else will come along once a year and do the pruning. So those are the 2 projects that I wanted just to talk about very briefly. And as part of this, and I think just as like an insight into my design process, but is to get that information across, because one of the things about CAD is it's but ugly unless you're thinking about what the plants mean, and even then it's difficult. You can't see the shape of the plant. I've got an image in my mind's eye of what a blackcurrant bush looks like, but you wouldn't have no idea looking at this plant at all, at this plan. So what I do is to put in, let me give you an example. Whoa, where have you gone? Oh, it's just Google spreadsheets. I hate Google. Google suck all your data and spy on you, but they make a nice online spreadsheet. So what I've done here, I've actually written down all the information. If anyone wants, this is freely accessible. I'm not publicising it, but if anyone wants the information, wants a spreadsheet template, let me know and I can get it to you. But I have the bed, the name, the botanical name, rootstock, whether it's a UK native, height and width and quantity, what budget I've got to play with, whether I bought it, any extra notes and stuff. So here I've put in links so people can actually see, links off to come on, computer, links off to different plants, so that you can get an idea of what the plants are. And then, where's it gone? Here we go. Yes, here. So another example is that on here I have put in a link to the image gallery, the forestgardengallery.uk, so that people, if you're using a plant, so you've got a spreadsheet, you've got a spreadsheet, and you've got a list of the plants that you want, and you go, what does this look like? And you say, this is what a fully grown elder looks like. It looks like this. So that's the idea behind combining a visual record of each individual plant, and then a spreadsheet, and then for an added geeky bonus, I have got 1 second. Where has it gone? Here we go. So I've got like a list of trees of that I'm using, and rather than keep on writing out the same trees, I have so it gives you the height, the diameter, and the species. I've actually just done a really, really simple little it's called blocks. It's like a symbol. So if I'm here, I go apple Malus domestica M.d MM106. You can see here. I don't know if you can see that. M.d MM106, and it's 4 meters by 4 meters, and I can just copy and paste that straight into a drawing, into a CAD drawing, and then it's like, oh yeah, so I need an apple, I need a pear, I need a plum, and I can just drag and drop them and then edit them and add more details later. The really cool thing is, what you can do, the way that I've built it, is that you can turn off the plant label, so you get less information, but just one click, and it just gives you the name, and it's not so cluttered. Then you get a better idea of the different plants. And the beauty of this is, I bring this in. I don't know. I'll just create a new document, and I'd paste it in. Bump. And you see straight away I can just pop like apple trees all over the place, and do the same with whatever other tree I want, and straight away it gives me the layers. So it's got the plant tree and the plant label, and it gives me the block, the symbol that I'm using. And I can then, what I then do is to zoom in and say, well, actually I want to I'll explode that. And then I can just type in a name. Hold on a second, it's a bit slow. And I could type in a name, I don't know, Lord Lambourne, for example, which is an apple name. And then it puts that name in, so that I can customize them when I bring them into a plan. But then that kind of ties in with the spreadsheet, and then ties in with the image gallery as well. So there we go. And that's, that's how I kind of come at creating different plant lists and different ideas. So I'll have a look, see what the plants look like. So I'll use Pinterest, for example. Like here, this is the Poppet Sands property. I'll get images of the different plants, and then I will see if they're native, if there's a native, like a native plant I can get, field scabious, and then I'll add them to the spreadsheet, and then I'll cross-reference them as well into like an image gallery. So that's everything for now. I just one last thing. So I've been talking vast amount. So one last thing. This is my new project, which isn't off the ground yet. So the Forest Garden CAD project is like a list of forest garden plants. So I got the Forest Garden Gallery, which is what people on the WhatsApp group are helping out with. There's a Forest Garden CAD project, which is basically my template of forest garden plants that are in CAD format. And then I'm doing a spreadsheet to go along with that as well. And then that cross-references the Forest Garden Gallery for the images, so you can then see the images. And then for the Forest Garden CAD, if you're into CAD and you're into computers and you want to do designing, then this is where it will be. This is the forest. It's my old web design GitHub repository. GitHub is a place where you keep computer code, and you can keep like CAD files as well. And this is my template file. I'll keep it here. So that's another project. And then my final project is a Wilde flower gallery, and this is Yeah, this isn't. I haven't started this yet, but it's exactly the same idea as a forest garden gallery. You want to know what wildflowers look like. There isn't really kind of one place where you go to get images of the different native wildflowers. So I want to slowly create the same kind of thing where you have wildflowers, an image gallery of wildflowers that then you can then use for an ornamental wildlife garden and incorporate them into a forest garden as well. This hasn't got off the ground yet. This is wildflower gallery wildflower gallery .uk, and I'm using an image gallery called Resource Space, which is just going to be a fun thing. There's a story behind this, but I won't bore you with it. But that should be really good. I'm really looking forward to using that. So those are the three things then. So just to kind of recap on the on today. So forest garden's great. You're integrating different aspects of gardening. So you've got the wildlife, you have the ornamental, and you have the edible, and you're bringing all three together, and so they're working together. That's the takeaway, and these are merely tools that you are using for that end. Anyway, so that's me. I'm going to stop there. So I'll just quickly check the chat. So I'll just say thank you for watching. Hope that was useful.